Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Tao and I'm the host of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Once again, we have an amazing guest today. We have Paul Dorasil, the Senior Director of Reporting and Analytics for Home Point Financial. And today we are going to be speaking about industry trends for 2021. So thank you so much, Paul, for joining us. I'm very excited to speak with you about just some awesome trends that we're going to see evolving throughout 2021.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's just get started. Can you please tell the audience more about your background and just introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Paul Dorasil. I've been working with data for a very long time. I have a master's degree in economics. From grad school, I started working in the mortgage industry, and then I navigated over to hospitality. I did a stint in healthcare, and now I'm back in the mortgage industry. Things are a lot different now than they were before.
Yeah, definitely. And so what kind of made you interested in analytics?
Sure. Well, I've always been a really detail-oriented person, kind of in general. But I think that when I was in undergrad, I switched my major, I think like 5 times. I started out as a chemistry major, and then I switched it a bunch, and I ended up in a business class. I was in an economics class, and I thought it was really, I was very interested in applying principles of mathematics to people and to social situations. And I think that economics does that better than a lot of the other social sciences. And so I wrote a paper on lottery games whenever I was an undergrad and got it published. And that really got me into doing research. And so I went to graduate school and at the University of Florida, wrote another paper on judging bias and high school debate. And wrote some other stuff and graduated from there. When I got into the mortgage industry, I was really impressed by the amount of data that existed and the level at which that data was captured. I mean, every single thing that you do related to your mortgage is captured in a very standard way. And so it creates this really interesting laboratory for answering questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's interesting how you kind of brought up the idea of bias within high school debate teams. I think that's interesting because I used to participate when I was in high school, kind of similar to debate, but it was it was like a team where you would basically have 5 people from each school kind of representing, sitting up at the podium, and then the person would be like speaking and asking a question, and then you would buzz in answering a question. So that's kind of interesting to hear about biases and just being able to analyze that. Do you think you can talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, to be fair, that was a paper that I wrote 10 years ago, but I can, it was an interesting paper. So I got into it because I was a high school debater. And I was a high school debate judge and coach. And so whenever I got into graduate school, I thought, what can I write a paper on that I already know a lot about? And I thought, how can I relate high school debate, within an analytical framework? And so one of the big questions that everybody had always had was, how fair is judging in debate? It's a very subjective question, who won this debate? And so I thought about, how can we measure that? How could we measure who has an advantage walking into a debate round? And so one of the ways that I looked at this is, obviously you have people who are better or worse at high school debate. And so just the fact that you win, if you win a lot of rounds, then you're better. That makes you better. And so what I wanted to do is find situations of non-transitivity where you would see, debater A beats debater B, debater B beats debater C, but then you see debater C beats debater A. And if you have that kind of situation, then, you could have better or worse performance in individual rounds. But if you find that happening systemically, then there could be something else that's going on. And so the variables that we captured in that, what side of the topic you were on. So you could either be affirmative or negative. We also captured the student's gender, the competitors' genders, and the judges' genders. And then we also captured the region. So where the people were from. So what high school you were from, or if you were a judge, what part of the country you live in. And we found some really interesting results. We found that if you're negating a topic, you have a significant advantage over somebody who's affirming the topic. That was no real surprise. Everybody kind of already knew that within the debate community. But that was something that we wanted to control for, because if you're negative and you win, then that's less indicative that your judge was biased. It's just, you're negative. So you had an advantage there. We didn't find any evidence of gender bias between the judges and competitors. That doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't something else baked in there, but in our data, we didn't find any statistical evidence of it. But we did find significant evidence of regional bias. So if I'm a judge and I'm from Texas, which I am, and I have two debaters in front of me, one of them's from Texas and one of them's from California, then even if, then the debater from California has the advantage statistically. If that's all that we know about the round, we know that there's an advantage there. Obviously, if they're both from the same region, then there, there would be no bias to measure. But yeah, that was one of the interesting results that came out of that. And I mean, that's pretty easily explainable if you understand high school debate and how it's taught. A lot of people go to regional camps. So if you're in California, you'll probably go to VBI that's located in San Francisco. If you're in Texas, then you might go to UNT that's in North Texas. And so you're going to be taught differently based on where you live, and you're going to be taught differently by people who are from those regions. And that's especially true with the way that the tournaments work. You have local tournaments and then you have national tournaments. And so the people who interact the most with each other are the people who are on a local level. If I've debated in front of this judge 10 times and you've debated in front of them once, I have an advantage. And that's a regional advantage. So that was an interesting paper. And that was something that I did while I was in graduate school. It got published by, I don't even remember, it was 10 years ago, but it ended up getting published, and it was a cool little, introduction into doing analytics before I went off into the professional world.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I like that kind of helped you narrow down your search for what you wanted to do in the future. So that's awesome. Now I just kind of wanted to transition to more about tech trends that you're interested in. So data science, we know, is a pretty broad term, and it kind of incorporates a lot of different tools and methods that different data scientists have to use in order to get the job done for whatever project or company that they're working with. And so what are some interesting tech trends that you have been currently seeing that you just want to talk more about?
Sure. Yeah, and data science is kind of a loaded term. It's a new term. It's something that, we've been doing data science for a lot longer than we were calling it data science. But yeah, in terms of technology, I think the most interesting trend that I'm seeing, so whenever I first started working, everybody used SAS because I'm kind of old. And everybody used SAS. That was the industry standard, and you used it because you knew that it worked. Everything was very documented. And it was king. Nobody competed with SAS. You had people who used, R on their own time or Python on their own time, but it was small fry compared to with, the industry hold that SAS had. That's changed over time. And I not to say that SAS isn't competitive. I'm sure that they still are, and they're probably going to disagree with a lot of what I say on this. But the industry has moved much more towards open source software, and I would say faster than I expected it to. The adoption of R and Python has been rapid, and the documentation is there. Everybody feels just as secure. Everybody feels confident that the code is running the way that it should, that everything's documented, that you're using it properly. And because technology has developed and methodologies have developed so fast, it's been much easier to keep up with those whenever you're coding in R and Python, because everything's open source. You don't have to wait for a new version to come out. And so that's been a big change. I think that now what you're seeing is growing collaboration between programmers. I think that you had a time period there where you would get a project and you would work on it as an individual. And now the projects are getting big enough and complex enough that you really need a team. And that means that you need a collaboration platform. So you're seeing things like Google Colab really explode in the industry. People, using them. That way you can store data on the cloud. Everybody's using the same data. You can store programs that access that data on the cloud, and so you can. I can write something, give somebody else a link, and they can run exactly the same code that I wrote, and they can contribute to that. And it makes it much easier to work with people that are on the same team. I think that that's going to be a big trend. It already is. moving forward. It'll be interesting to see kind of what the next wave is after that. But that's certainly the wave that we're riding right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just collaboration in any respect really is really important, especially for this year during the pandemic when everything's remote. A lot of companies are looking to other platforms to be able to communicate more effectively and work on projects and programming stuff together. Are there any other, I know that this year, 2021 just started, we're still in January right now. Are there any other exciting industry trends that you're looking forward to seeing evolve throughout the year?
Yeah. So I think that you touched on working remotely, and I think that that's going to be something that's going to stick around. The pandemic threw us all a curveball. No, I think I can say confidently, no one expected 2020 to happen the way that it did. But now that it did, you have teams that have been working remotely since March, and for almost a full year, effectively, and that transition was more difficult for some people than others, but everyone's made it. And now that we've made it here, I don't see that going away. A lot of companies are going to continue remote work going forward, and that's going to be really interesting to see. And even if you're not working remotely, I think the days of standing over somebody else's computer and telling them what to do, those are gone. You're going to be sharing screens, you're going to be collaborating on the same project. You're going to be at your desk, they're going to be at their desk, and you're going to be working on the same project. Or even if you're in the same conference room, you're not going to have two people using the same machine. I think that that's a big change. I think that you're also going to see differences in methodologies. I mean, over the last few years, we've had some really big advances in terms of artificial intelligence that I don't think that many industries have really kept up with. And so what you're going to see is a lot of the deep learning technologies starting to integrate into smaller companies, into more companies, and you're going to see big efficiency gains there. I think for a while it's been, you've had the Googles and the Amazons of the world who have been really leveraging these technologies, and you're going to see a much wider dispersion of those technologies through 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's great that you also brought up the fact that everyone was forced to be remote during this time, especially people who kind of work in the corporate world, especially. Everyone had to be remote. I feel like in the past, a lot of tech people have tried to make their lives remote instead of having to go to the office and work. But now that everyone was kind of forced to do it, it's clear that it works and it is doable, and everyone is still able to collaborate and communicate effectively while still being remote and not having to come to the office 5 times a week every single day. So I think that that's a very good point that you brought up, and that's something that probably will be staying in the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the employers that take the hard stance and say, nope, everybody is vaccinated, you're all coming back into the office, and it's mandatory. I think that those employers are going to leave themselves at a competitive disadvantage compared to employers that at least allow the option. But then if you're allowing the option, then I think that you're going to have employers that say, well, we can save a lot of money if we don't have as much office space because we don't need it anymore. And it's not going to be every company, but it's going to be a lot of them, especially with your tech space. So like what you're going to see is like a lot of companies are going to say, well, we're going to have our IT department is remote, or our analytics group, that's going to be remote, but not everyone's going to be remote. I think that you're going to have a lot of call centers that are remote call centers because you don't need to have office space in order to do this. A lot of the arguments that have been made for a long time against remote work, things like data security, things like, people won't feel the same kind of connection, there will be efficiency losses. All of those arguments, I think, were effectively answered by 2020. And it'll be really difficult for anybody to say, we can't have remote work because it's not efficient. Well, it's been efficient for the last year. Or it's been efficient enough at least. And I think that a lot of companies now have a lot of data that they can say, we've measured and we've seen that our company keeps trucking, it keeps going, it keeps moving, and we're still able to more or less do what we could do before. And if you're the kind of employee that has a hard time with self-discipline or motivating yourself to work remotely, you're going to find yourself at a disadvantage to those that can do it. So I think it's a brave new world that we're walking into now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that even if things do become an option for some companies, I feel like a lot of people might still opt to choose to be remote just because it also saves time and money on the employees' end in terms of the
Mhm.
commuting to the office every single day, and a lot of time too. I think a lot of us can agree that we've had a lot more time on our hands to do things more effectively or efficiently because the commute time is gone now. My commute used to be maybe 2 hours round trip to go to the office and to come back. So,
Mine was one
um,
hour, and I thought
yeah,
that.
yeah. So quite a lot is going to be changing for sure. But how do you think technology and the analytics world will change in the future?
Well, I'll get onto that in just a second. Just one more comment on remote work, just taking it from a different angle. I think you're going to have a lot of companies in the interior of the country who benefit considerably based on remote work. Because if you're a company that's based in Lincoln, Nebraska, or if you're in Detroit, Michigan, now you don't just have to hire people who live an hour away from your headquarters. You can hire people from San Francisco. You can hire people from New York. You can hire people from all over the world, and and you have that available to you. And so that's going to change wages. On the other side of it, if you're somebody who lives on the coasts, now you can work anywhere. I think that you're going to see a lot of people moving to less expensive areas because now your job isn't tied to your geography. So you can make the same amount of money and you can move to Vancouver, or you can move to anywhere else that's a nice place to be, but has a much lower cost of living.
You brought up a great point saying that anybody can apply to other jobs within anywhere in the world, really, since if we were to go remote, then it would be a remote environment to work. I'm also wondering if that would bring up the amount of competition within a specific position. So I'm wondering if more people will be applying to positions that are remote just because you can live anywhere that you want in the world and still be able to work effectively and communicate with the company and do your job for that position. So it's a lot to think about for sure.
I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to see wage flattening, where you
Mhm.
see wages on the coasts are going to be going down because there's more competition, but you're going to see wages in the interior of the country are going to be going up because now you could get a 30% raise from where you are because you're now working for a company that's in San Francisco, and they're going to think you're a steal because you're still a lot cheaper than what they used to be paying somebody for that role. So I think it's going to be a really interesting dynamic. I think we're just now seeing how that's going to unfold, but I think it's going to happen quickly.
Yeah,
You're already
absolutely.
seeing it in real estate prices, by the way. You're seeing real estate prices in places like Dallas, where I live, are rapidly increasing because we've got a very educated workforce here in Dallas, and a lot of those people are now able to get higher paying jobs that are outside of Dallas. And so as a result, they can stay where they are, or they can move here. And yeah, you're seeing it reflected in real estate.
And I think that's so interesting because I forget what year it was. I think it might have been 2008 when the housing kind of crashed in the US. And I think a lot of people maybe thought that that would have happened during this COVID pandemic since the stock markets crashed during March time. And so I think everybody kind of expected, oh, the housing's going to be next, but it seems like housing has been pretty up in an upward trend lately, and it hasn't been going down a lot. It seems like people are still home buyers, people are still renting out apartments just fine. It seems like there's not much change there, which is really interesting because I think it's the opposite from what people expected to happen within the housing industry anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, obviously, there's no. I don't know what that trend looks like going forward, but it's been an interesting year. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for just being on our podcast today. We really appreciate your time, and it was a great conversation talking about some cool industry trends that we're going to be seeing throughout 2021. Where can our community find you online to connect with you?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn. Paul Dorasil. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really have any other online presence. I'm not super social guy, but yeah, I'm there.
Awesome. And for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io. And this episode is sponsored by Pandio. They're innovating the tech space with an Apache Pulsar messaging system. So you can learn more about their work at pandio.com. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us. It was a great conversation with you, and I look forward to just speaking with you and connecting with you in the future.
Thank you.